Alright guys, so tomorrow we are going to be going into depth about how we create proteins in our body. But before we can do that, we need to fully understand what is DNA. So how does our body function? Our body fully functions based off of what is inside our cells and our genetics. And all of that starts with your DNA. So our bodies need many things to function, but with DNA has different many things where our genetics are. So as you can see right here, this is a strand of DNA, and inside this strand are many different complex things. And the DNA is found in the nucleus. So the DNA is created in the nucleus, it gets all these different things together, and there are different parts of the DNA. But the DNA has to stay inside the nucleus unless it is taken out through RNA, and that's what we're going to get into detail about later. So let's just have a quick little review about what DNA really is. So the DNA is found in the cell, but we can't study the cell because it's so small. So we need a microscope to actually see what is inside this cell. And once we see what's inside, we can blow up these images. So this is a microscopic view because we have to blow it up so that we can learn and see more about it. Now, if it was something big like your bed or your hand, this would be a macro, but instead we see something super tiny. So then we are going to be looking into microscopes in class within the next few days and weeks as we study the cells in DNA and genetics. So DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. So go ahead and give that a try and saying it. It's a little difficult, and I know unless I am reading it, I am not going to be saying this. So don't feel bad if it was a tongue twister for you. That's why we like to call it DNA. And as you guys know, throughout science, as we do it in our class, a lot of times we don't say full words, and this is why. They get a little difficult. So, DNA is what holds our genetics and tells our body what to do and how to look. Our DNA is complex, and our DNA is what makes us who we are. Without our DNA, we're nothing. Our DNA is one of the first things that starts to form inside when a baby is being created. The DNA is so important. The DNA is what tells our bodies what to do, how to do it, and how to create it. It tells our bodies the way we're going to move. It tells our bodies how we're going to look. And so there's so much DNA, and DNA can tell, as you guys I'm sure have seen on crime scenes, everybody has their own specific kind of DNA. Just like when you're watching CSI and they swab their mouth to see if they were the ones there. All of us have very specific DNA that is our own. Now, how do we get our DNA? Our DNA is formed from our dad and our mom, and it creates us. So, as you can see here, we have a blue DNA strand and a yellow DNA strand, and they come together to form one. Now, you get half from your dad and half from your mom. You see that there are two strands. One strand comes from your dad, and the other strand comes from your mom, and it creates your own personal strand. Now, something to think about is, does that mean your strand is the same as your brothers and your sisters? No, it's not. And that's when genetics and RNA come together, and it can be very complicated, and mutations come in there, and these are all things that we're going to be studying throughout this week. So we will be annotating an article in class tomorrow, and in class you will learn that there is so much more about DNA and how it can create things. The number one thing that we're going to be focusing on is how proteins are really what helps our body form and shape and have energy and all kinds of things. And we're going to learn how DNA creates that protein. So we're going to go into depth, and we're going to learn how DNA can come out of the nucleus. If you remember at the beginning of this video, you are able to see that I said DNA cannot come out of the nucleus unless it turns into RNA. So tomorrow in the article, you're going to see how it turns into RNA and how that RNA comes out of the nucleus and forms into genes, and then ribosomes come into it, and these will be all new terms that we're going to look into and annotate and figure out together. So think about DNA, ask your parents about your guys' genetics, and come to class tomorrow prepared and to tell me more about where your guys' DNA comes from.